When patience runs out, revenge takes over, and it's glorious. Story 1. Classmate got pranked by fake letter after screwing us over. Old story. This is a very old revenge from when I was a teenager in the 90s. There were only a few PC gamers around at the time, and without internet it was hard to get hold of new games. Me and a friend bought games from abroad via airmail because local stores didn't sell many, but these weren't cheap. We'd trade them with each other and would copy the copy protection, which was often included, so this made it semi-affordable for us. A new kid joined our class, however, and his uncle had tons and tons of games we didn't have. We offered to trade games with him and gave him our original copies for him to copy, and in return we got corrupted floppies. Yes, this was the 90s. Missing copy protection, etc. And after a few months of this, we received not a single working game, while he had received all of our games. The Settlers, Doom 2, Monkey Island games, etc. And some he returned in less than nice condition. We had enough, and we wanted to get revenge, but we didn't know how. Now, the 90s were known for the many AIDS campaigns after Freddie Mercury died of AIDS in 1991. I was a huge fan of Queen, and this new friend would often mock me for liking a gay singer. He came from a very conservative family, and his mother was quite Catholic, and this is what gave us an idea when we had to attend an AIDS event organized by a certain foundation with our class. At the end, we were given flyers about AIDS, homosexuality, etc., and free condoms with the logo of the AIDS Foundation were up for grabs. We each grabbed a few for reasons you'll soon reach below. Me and my friend were one of the very few with a computer and inkjet printer at home, so we got this idea to screw him over. We created a fake letter addressed to our friend pretending we were the AIDS Foundation, copying the logo and everything to make it look as authentic as possible. It went something like this. Dear first name, thank you for your letter. We understand it's difficult being open about being homosexual, and you have many questions after the event you attended with your class. Please find enclosed a flyer which should answer many of your questions as well as some condoms. Please practice safe sex at all times. We enclosed all the flyers we had gotten at the event as well as the condoms and mailed it to Mr. Last Name to guarantee his father would open the letter first. We had no idea the shitstorm this would create. We knew him being homophobic. This would be great revenge. But apparently his mother had been in tears, screaming, his father angry, and he was grounded for weeks with his parents convinced he was gay. In the end, he figured we had something to do with it because we had been carefully fishing to see if our prank had succeeded. But at first he thought the letter was authentic, and we had contacted the foundation in his name. When we finally confessed we had faked it all, we had a nice trip to the principal to explain why we had done this, with his parents present. It's still the best revenge I ever took in my life, even though it was 30 years ago. Story 2. Hurt my friend. Good luck with your education. Back in the before times, when the internet was still a new thing with lots of potential, I was enrolled at my local junior college. A little into the semester, I moved in with my GF so we could both save on rent. I will call my girlfriend Lucy for the purposes of this post. One night, Lucy says she invited a friend from one of her classes for a game night. Sounded good to me. We invited a couple of other friends, and it was a really fun night. Surprisingly, it turned out her friend, Sarah, was someone I knew from high school. We weren't close friends, but we knew each other and got along fine. After that night, Sarah was invited over pretty frequently for dinner, game nights, or to watch a movie. She even brought her boyfriend over a couple of times, I'll call him Jay, but he never quite fit in. He would be quiet and/or standoffish, wouldn't engage much, and just seemed like he never wanted to be there. It was clear no one really felt comfortable having him there, but we invited him to be polite to Sarah. Fortunately, he only came over 2 or 3 times, and found an excuse to refuse every other time. A month or 2 after this all started, Sarah called my GF crying and asked if she could come over. Of course we said yes. The story that was relayed was Jay was getting very upset with Sarah for coming over to our place so frequently and accused her of cheating on him. She never clarified if he thought she was cheating with me, Lucy, or both, but any option was ridiculous and never happened. But he confronted her and started verbally assaulting her, calling her all kinds of nasty names. At one point, she tried to walk past him to leave, and he shoved her back. This caused her to trip over a coffee table, fall, and get a huge bruise on her butt and lower back. Lucy told me about the bruise as Sarah had shown her. I didn't see it for myself. Sarah swore up and down that he had never physically assaulted her before, and she believed it was just an accident. But I was pissed. I wanted revenge. You don't mess with my friends, and you don't assault women. I wanted to beat the crap out of him, but while I'm a very big guy, I've never been in a fight and am not a violent person, but a revenge plan formed in my mind. At the time, I was working in the administration building of the school as a student employee. As part of my job, I could access anyone's student records, their fees, and their class schedule. The date was fast approaching that was the last possible day to drop or add classes without penalty or specific permission, so I looked Jay up in the system, got his student ID number and the other information that I needed, and put my plan into motion. On the last day to change schedules, I used the dedicated enrollment phones in the administration building. Internet class scheduling wasn't a thing that was set up yet, and canceled all of his classes. Not only that, but I went through and added every class one could find that had a course fee. If you owed a debt at the school, you couldn't get copies or your transcripts or anything else. Something that I didn't mention was that Jay was a foreign student and couldn't stay in the country if he wasn't enrolled with a certain number of units. I wish I could give more info about the fallout, but as I didn't want to get this traced back to me, I didn't tell anyone, nor did I pull up his records again for quite a while. I did get a little payoff, though. Sarah was really worried about seeing him again. She had broken up with him the night after he pushed her, as they had an English class together on Tuesdays. She said that on Tuesday he was there, but there was also someone new standing in the class. He was standing because there weren't enough seats. The teacher, seeing that there were more people than should be held roll, and guess who wasn't on it? You're right, it was Jay. Apparently, after I dropped all his classes, someone on the wait list got in. Jay tried to argue with the teacher, but as Teach had the official class roster, and Jay wasn't on it, there was nothing he could do. Sarah said she never saw Jay in that class again. I don't know much more about what happened. Lucy and I eventually broke up, so I didn't see Sarah very often after that. After a while, I did look up Jay's class schedule, and all of the classes with course fees were gone. But he didn't have any other classes on the books either. I wanted to assume he was kicked out of school, but I didn't try to confirm it. Either way, Sarah didn't have to have a class with him, and while he probably deserved more, he was definitely inconvenienced and possibly kicked out of school. Sometimes I worry I was too harsh, but then I remembered that he deserved it. Mess with me, but not my friends. Story 3. Cheat on your wife with mine? I will burn your life to the ground. Way back in the early 2000s, I began to suspect that my wife was up to something. Our 2 kids were about 4 and 6, still young, but not so young they couldn't tell you something about what had happened in their day. They started talking a lot about staying with my wife's parents during the day, which wasn't really that strange in and of itself, but since they lived about 90 minutes away, doing so 2 or 3 times a week seemed a bit much. That was basically every day she wasn't working at her part-time job. When I asked her about it, she denied it, but was never a good liar. So I started tracking the mileage on her car, and sure enough, she was driving an extra 400 or so miles per week. I knew some shit was going on. Then one day I sat down at the computer and she had left a sticky note with her AOL password written on it next to the keyboard. I could not resist and logged in to read her emails and saw a few email exchanges between her and her college BFF where they discussed how my wife was regularly fucking one of her ex-BFs from high school. No mention of details about him other than my wife also talking shit about his wife, making fun of how she'd gotten fat after having kids. Anyway, I printed out these email exchanges and stashed them. I still needed to know the details, so I called a friend who was a cop, and he suggested I call a guy he knew that had left the force to become a PI. Ron was great. I paid his retainer and gave him the emails and what little I knew about my wife's activities, and he figured out exactly what she was doing. His report detailed with photos and times/dates/locations all about how she would take the kids to her parents, then go meet this guy for lunch, then they'd go to a dumpy motel for a few hours, after which she'd pick up the kids and return home. At this point, I hired a divorce lawyer. My parents cheated on each other, and the fallout absolutely fucked mine and my siblings' childhood. It was something that was totally unacceptable. I also asked Ron to find out what he could about this guy. Ron absolutely came through. I learned his name, Bob, that he was married and had 3 kids. I also found out that he worked as a VP of sales for his father-in-law's business. At this point, I had my lawyer draw up the divorce papers. I also asked Ron for a couple more copies of his report, and one more thing I wanted him to do for me. On the same day I had my wife served with the divorce papers at her work, I had Ron meet with this guy's wife and show her everything he'd found out. She seemed nice, and I figured that she deserved to know what her dear hubby was up to. What she did with that information was up to her. While the information about my wife's infidelity didn't really matter in my divorce proceedings, Bob's wife did a real number on him. According to the publicly available court documents from the divorce and other related proceedings, she cleaned out their joint account, took the kids, and left. As soon as her dad found out what he'd done, Bob was fired, and since her parents actually owned the house where Bob and his wife lived, he also got evicted. Their divorce was ugly. Lots of fighting in, and evidently out of, court. I guess Bob went to the house and started arguing with his wife, and it escalated to the point her brother stepped in, and Bob got his nose broken. There were restraining orders, a few more incidents with police reports, criminal charges, jail time, and so on. I can't find Bob on the internet anywhere these days. Last I heard, he'd left the state and his ex-wife did okay. She went to work at her dad's company and took over after he retired. As for me, my ex and I got along well enough. I didn't engage with her on anything that wasn't related to the kids, and now that they're both adults, I don't talk to her at all anymore. I don't hate her or anything, but I only care in the context that she is my kids' mom and is important to them, nothing beyond that. 4. Neighbor was stealing water from my supply, so I ruined him. I live in Asia and just purchased a new house. Now, the previous owners were family friends who needed cash urgently and haven't been living in my country for nearly 3 years. So I got it for a great price in the middle of the capital city. The sale was finalized at the start of this month, and I moved in right after. The house was definitely a fixer-upper, as the previous owners had left mid-renovation, and the main door was locked with just a padlock, not even a door lock. The house had no gate, meaning anyone could just walk right on in. The first day I moved in, someone's bike was parked in the garage. I just parked it on the road on the same day I had a gate installed. An angry man was knocking on my gate later, and I didn't bother answering, but through my window I could see him giving up and taking the bike after 15 minutes. So already I wasn't digging the neighborhood, but I didn't have any incidents after that, aside from people not knowing that this was no longer an abandoned house, so my gate was blocked more often than never, but a no parking sign on my gate fixed that issue. Last week, I was having a shower in my bathroom and I noticed my water pressure was lower than usual. I also heard my next-door neighbor's water pump going. Now this neighbor, an old guy, lived in a 3-storied house, the first being the lowest and the one he lived in. The other 2 floors were rented out to tenants. This guy wasn't happy about the house being sold and voiced many concerns to my friends, the previous owners. He was super angry about it, and my friends did warn me, but I'm a 6-foot guy with 3 dogs. No way he was doing anything, and yep, he didn't. So with this living situation, a water pump is needed to pump water to the tanks on the roof, since the public supply's pressure is not enough to get it up 3 stories. Now, I heard the water pump going and immediately was suspicious. Sure, coincidences exist, but it wouldn't hurt to check it out. I waited till his pump turned off, and then turned on different taps in the house. Sure enough, the pressure was back to normal. This made me even more suspicious, but if he was stealing water, it also made sense. The water bills had been going up over the years this house wasn't lived in, but the house also had some water leaks. So it was chalked up to that, even if the bills were too high to be caused just by leaks. Now it's starting to make sense. At some point in the last 3 years, this old miser thought he'd saved the cost of paying for water and waltzed into the property and is siphoning water from my lines. I couldn't find where exactly he was siphoning water from, but after checking my pressure multiple times, I was pretty sure. So I sat on it for a few days, thinking if I should confront him, go the legal path, or just let it be. Now, water in my country is very cheap. My total bill, even with washing 3 animals, a car every week, and watering my garden only costs like $5 per month, even with the neighbor also stealing some of it. But it wasn't about how much I was paying or who was paying for it. It's about entitled old people who think that they're deserving of using other people's resources without paying for it, and then getting away with it. It didn't sit right with me, and I really wanted to teach him a lesson. What I did was really simple. I just turned off my water from the mains. I wouldn't have to break into his property, nor would I be breaking any laws. It was the best way of getting back at him without needing to even lift a muscle. So on Monday, just 4 days ago, I waited till the pump flicked on and turned off the supply. Now, the way household tanks work in my country is that there's a ball valve in the tank which detects the level of water and turns on the pump. If the level doesn't increase, the valve stays open, which electronically sends a signal to the pump to stay on until the level gets to a point at which the valve closes and also shuts off the pump. However, the level wasn't increasing, and anyone knows that starving a pump of water isn't a good idea. This way, my expectation was that I'd burn out his pump and cause issues with his tenants. What I didn't account for is that his pump running constantly would mess up the fuses by constantly drawing power overnight and absolutely destroy his wiring. If he decided to upgrade his household wiring to a more modern standard, this would have been prevented. This house clearly still had 90s era wiring. At around 3 a.m., I heard all residents in the house waking up and talking in hushed voices about why just their house in the neighborhood doesn't have power or water. I found out about the power part because the tenants devolved into shouting at their landlord. Our tenant protection laws are very important, and power and water are classed as essential even on a state level. Cutting those services are grounds for lawsuits, unless due to weather or some other unavoidable reason. In this case, the landlord is responsible for keeping the house wiring up to date and in good condition, alongside the supply of water. So the tenants were not happy, and one of them immediately moved out 2 days later when it was informed that water and power will not be returning the very same day this happened. Both tenants in the 2 floors lodged a complaint with the police, and if a person is in clear breach of laws, the police have the authority to fine or penalize the person without a court judgment. It can be challenged in court if the person thinks that they were unfairly penalized, but they still have to pay the fines, and will only be refunded if and when the court finds the fines unlawful. So now, the landlord lost both tenants and has to pay a fine of $500, which is a lot of money in our country. He also has to refund the security deposits of both tenants, and cannot rent out until both issues are fixed, which will cost him more money. As of right now, he's moving out on Sunday to his daughter's place since he cannot afford to live alone. The tenants were his only source of income, and he's a retired mechanic, so he has no other income. He did find out why the motor kept drawing power, overloaded the wiring, and burned out. He came by to my gate and asked me if I turned off my water, and I said, "Oh yeah, my tank had a new leak on a pipe and I turned it off till the next day until the plumber came by to fix the issue." Y'all, the look on his face. He kept a straight one, but I just knew he was holding back. He just said, "Oh, okay," and went back inside. Not sure if he knows I know, but I don't care because he can't do anything. I'm getting a plumber down next week to correct my plumbing and remove any pipes that leave my property. So I got rid of my water issue and a neighbor who could potentially be a pain in the ass by simply flicking a tap off. 2 birds, 1 stone, I'd say. Story 5. If you're going to steal the catalytics off my truck, you should have checked that they were actually functional first. Wasn't so funny when it was turned. Was a fun morning at the beginning of last week, starting up my truck and waking everyone up at 2:45 a.m. to learn someone swiped the hollowed out cats. The idiots missed the neighbor's cameras that basically gave away who they were. It's 2 kids from the area who drive around in a pretty busted up police Crown Vic. I chose not to call the cops. Instead, I called one of my friends who's code enforcement and let him know what my plan was, and he relayed the info to the police that I was finally going to do a nuisance tow on that same Crown Victoria. The car they drive isn't street legal as it has no license plates or insurance or working taillights and rattles like shit due to the trash sound system. They also spend their whole day at a chicken shack smoking. Not sure who they're getting money from, but I'm guessing stealing catalytics was part of the equation. When I spotted the car sitting on a quiet street, I called it in and got the go-ahead to tow. I took it straight to the police station, and they tried to run a owner check with the VIN number, only to find out it hadn't been registered since 2011, and the owner was someone other than the kids who sold them the car with no title because of all the back registration owed. The cops said we can go ahead and take it to the junkyard till they can get a black title, aka certificate of destruction. By then, the 2 idiots were running around all over town looking for their car, thinking it got stolen by one of their friends as a prank. The key lock was so worn out you could start it with any car key. They found it at the junkyard and tried to steal it by one of them distracting the owner and the other stealing their car. But the junkyard was aware of who they were, so they cut the drive shaft off beforehand. I missed out on this part, but they got arrested for trying to steal their car back, and they watched as the junkyard used a crane to rip the car to shreds. When I saw it, the remains looked like a toddler just ripped it to the bare frame out of curiosity. They've been out of jail since, but haven't left their trailer. I did a drive-by earlier and noticed a beater Jeep Liberty in their driveway, also with no plates, and already working with the cops on taking that too if I see it out in a public, except I won't miss the show next time. Story 6. Tricking my slacker coworker into sabotaging himself. I work in an office with a guy I'll call Seth. Seth is that coworker everyone knows. Lazy, always passing his work on to someone else, and somehow always getting away with it. He'll sit around on his phone or go to the bathroom every 10 minutes. He's the kind of guy who will show up late, make some lame excuse about traffic, and then disappear for lunch for 2 hours. For the past 6 months, Seth's favorite target has been me. He'll send emails asking if I can help out with a project, but what he really means is, do all the work while I take the credit. I complained to my boss a couple of times, but somehow Seth always managed to weasel his way out of trouble. The final straw came when he passed off a major report that was due to a client in 2 days, dumping it on me last minute. One day I casually asked him if he was good with Excel, and he admitted he didn't know much about it. Perfect. The next time Seth tried to dump a bunch of spreadsheets on me to organize for his next report, I agreed. But this time, I embedded a series of hidden formulas into the documents. These formulas didn't do anything important, just enough to mess with the numbers if someone didn't know how to check for hidden cells. It took me a little time, but I was careful not to make it too obvious. The kicker? Every time Seth tried to copy and paste the data into his report, it would scramble everything just enough to be completely useless. On the day the report was due, Seth slacked off like usual, assuming I had handled it like always. When the client called, furious because the report was filled with nonsense numbers, Seth panicked. He rushed to fix it, but every time he tried to fix one part of the report, something else would break. He came to me, frantic, and asked for help. I acted confused and said, "Oh, I don't know what happened. Maybe it's a glitch?" I gave him some vague advice and watched as he spent the entire day trying to salvage his mess. Our boss found out, and for once, Seth couldn't talk his way out of it. He got lambasted for screwing up such an important project and was put on temporary leave without pay. I guess he'll be doing his own work from now on. Story 7. We reverse gazumped a greedy landlord, and it was glorious. Gazumping occurs when an agent or seller accepts an offer you make to buy a property at an agreed price, but the property is sold to someone else. This usually happens when the vendor sells the property for a higher amount. This happened 15 years ago, and it is one of the proudest moments of my life. My best friend and her husband have 5 kids together. They lived in an expensive city and rented an old 4-bedroom house for $400 per week. The house was very run down with a disgusting kitchen and stink drains, but it was all they could afford at the time. Still, they made it work. The owner was a nice old lady who, as extremely wealthy and very fond of my friend. She froze the rent for 5 years and promised to let them buy the house once they had saved enough to get a loan from the bank. As she had helped other people in a similar way, they knew they could trust her, and so they saved every cent they could. It took them 5 years, but they finally told her they were ready. 2 days later, the nice old lady passed away, before anything was put in writing. Enter the new owners, the lady's 4 children, each extremely wealthy in their own right. They inherited a huge portfolio of properties. When they first spoke to my friends, they assured them that the sale would still go through, but they would have to wait until probate had settled. Confident, my friends started making some changes to the place. They started by stripping wallpaper, painting, and making plans. Finally, probate was settled and the owners agreed to go ahead with the sale for the previously agreed price. My friends applied for the loan, but to their shock, it was refused. The owners had raised the asking price by $80,000 without telling my friends. To make things even worse, the house would be put on the open market. In 7 days, there would be an open house, and, with the market the way it was, it would probably sell immediately. My friends were devastated. They might be able to borrow enough, but it would take longer than a week to get. To make matters worse, property prices had soared recently and rents had gone up a lot whilst theirs had been frozen. Not only were my friends going to struggle to get the money, if the place was sold to someone else and they were asked for a higher rent or were evicted, it would be nearly impossible to find an affordable place with more than 2 bedrooms. I was scared for my friends, but I was also incandescently angry. Those greedy sods were some of the wealthiest people in the city. They were screwing over a struggling family for less than $20,000 each. They didn't need the money. It as pure greed, and it was obvious that they'd always planned to do this. So while my friends scrambled to come up with the money, I started plotting. I looked up advice on what helps to make a sale. We needed to make the place as undesirable as possible without making my friends look like bad tenants. Uncluttered. We moved all the furniture in from the walls, added some extra furniture, and borrowed ornaments, and hung a load of motorcycle memorabilia on the walls. The place felt more smaller. Smell. My friend boiled a head of cabbage on the stove, and we sprayed ammonia around the front and back doors, because it smells like all the neighborhood cats had been marking their territory. We also poured 24 rotten eggs down the drain to make it smell like sewer gas. We obtained a moldy old couch and dumped in front yard of the neighbor across the road, with permission of course. Neighborhood X2. We started calling friends for help. Anybody with a loud and crappy car was asked to do a few laps in front of the block during the open day. The street was unusually busy that day. Everyone we knew found a reason to drive by. It was practically rush hour. Neighborhood X3. We called out mates from the rugby club, full contact football without any of that soft padding. A big portion of our club are very large men. The next door neighbor set up a barbecue in their front yard, and we offered free food and cheap beer. They came on motorcycles, wearing their roughest gear. There was quite a crowd. A lot of people showed up for the open day. Quite a few were in and out within minutes. One lady sat in her car and watched the party next door before driving away. The one bloke who stayed any length time was brave enough to start up a conversation with someone leaving the party. He asked if they were often there, and was told every couple of weeks or so they have an after-party morning, and the party the night before was 3 doors up. The partygoer also helpfully mentioned the troublesome drains that are always getting blocked by tree roots and stinking up the place. The potential buyer left without making an offer. So my friends were the only ones to make an offer. They still had to pay more than they'd planned, but not as much as the greed bastards wanted. My friends signed the papers and paid the deposit that day. So when the brave buyer put in an offer of $30,000 more than my friends, there was nothing the owners could do about it. Strict anti-gazumping laws. I would have loved to see the owners' faces when they found out. For all the people who are saying they had cheap rent, they didn't. $400 was the rent in 2004, and that was pretty high back then. By the time the lady died, average rent for a house that size had only gone up by about $40. Nowadays, 4-bedroom houses in that area go for approximately $800 per week. Story 8. Phone calls for the previous owner, who turned out to be my shitty manager. This is going to be a long one. TLDR at the end. This could also go in AITA sub. You guys decide. Names have been changed to keep anonymity. Mobile phones became common in my country around 2004, just as I finished high school. My parents bought me my first phone, a secondhand Nokia. It was bulky and basic, but I promised myself that someday I'd buy a new phone with my own money. When college started, I had a 2-hour daily commute. In high school, I had excelled academically and won several district-level awards. These awards were being distributed during my first year of college. One nationalized bank award finally gave me enough money for a new phone. I bought a Sony Ericsson K300i and a premium SIM card, not realizing it had been abandoned by its previous owner. By the third day, I started receiving calls for a guy named Bitsa from various financial institutions. It turned out the number previously belonged to him, and for 20 years, I've been getting these calls. Determined to keep my premium number, I began a routine of blocking wrong numbers. Back then, blocking was device-specific, so each time I got a new phone, I had to start over, keeping a list of numbers to block. I got my first job after graduating in 2009. Around 2010, I was assigned to a new project with a notorious reputation for burning people out due to a nefarious project manager named Bits. I didn't know his full name for quite a while. He took pride in making our lives a living hell. Bits ruled with an iron fist. From the moment his team stepped into the office, they were met with a barrage of emails and messages, each more urgent than the last. Bits thrived on creating chaos, often changing project deadlines on a whim, demanding his team work late into the night and through weekends. Bits' presence loomed over every task. He insisted on micromanaging every detail, yet was quick to take credit for any successes, no matter how small. Failures, however, were met with his notorious tirades, publicly berating his team and assigning blame without hesitation. His unpredictable temper kept everyone on edge, afraid to make the slightest mistake. Meetings were another tool in his arsenal of torment. He scheduled them during lunch breaks and after hours, ensuring no one could escape his grasp. These meetings were often pointless, serving only to reinforce his dominance and disrupt any semblance of work-life balance his team might have had. His relentless stream of emails continued around the clock, each carrying a thinly veiled threat, perfection, or dismissal. Under his reign, morale plummeted and burnout soared, yet Bits remained oblivious, satisfied only by his complete and total control. I was quite ashamed when I learned that he was from the same area as I was, and had gone to the same school, though years before me. In 2012, our company merged with a parent company. Almost nothing changed personnel-wise, but infrastructure-wise, we got MS Outlook and an organization view. That was when I first learned about Bits from an organizational hierarchy perspective. His full name was an eye-opener. It was Bitsa. Now, the name was common enough, but at the time, mobile numbers had an area-specific pattern, so I already knew that the previous owner of my number was from the same area as me. Still, it could be someone else. I wanted to dig deeper. I talked with an old mentor who lived in the same area and had coached several high school students for the last 2 decades. He confirmed my suspicions. I won't go into the details, but it was evident that Bitsa and Bits were the same person. I had been quite pissed with this unknown person named Bitsa for almost a decade by then, and Bits had been the bane of my, and several others, existence for quite some time. This is where the revenge lies. First, I unblocked all the numbers in my phone. I was getting 5 to 6 calls daily on average, but after unblocking about 150 numbers, it increased to 15 to 18. My answering strategy changed drastically. Instead of saying wrong number, I politely explained that the owner had changed his number and provided his current number to update their database. This is where I could be the AH. I also volunteered his manager's number in case he tries something else. The fallout was epic. These people had been trying to find him for almost a decade. Banks had sold his debts to companies that harass people for a living to get their money back. It turned out he had been taking loans in everyone's names, his wife, parents, uncles, aunts, and giving everyone that same number. He was evading credit card debt and loans of upwards of $200,000, equivalent in USD, but it's a shitload of money where we are from. Apparently, he had almost 20 cases filed against him, but no one could find him. Probably why he thought he could walk on water. There are multiple versions of what happened at the office when his manager started to get calls about him. He was let go about 2 months later. Haven't heard from him since. TLDR, previous owner of my number had duped several financial institutions. He later turned out to be my shitty boss. I informed the banks of his new number and his manager's number, leaving his career in shambles. Story 9. Fired from my job but received a year's worth of pay and got my boss fired. This happened in the early 2010s, before the advancement of technology in video editing and content creation. I was hired as a content creator for a university that wanted to leverage YouTube to kickstart their branding campaign. The pay was low, roughly $2,200 USD, and in those days, there were not that many video content creators around, and the process usually took a long time from start to finish. I was hired, and on my second day, my manager presented my KPI of 85310-minute videos in 52 weeks, which was impossible for a one-man team in those days. This meant I had to do the scripting, producing, casting talents, shooting videos, composing music — they were too cheap to pay for a royalty-free music subscription — and editing, all of which I had to use my own equipment and software because their cameras and computers were so old, they simply couldn't handle the strain of even doing things in 720p, much less 1080p. I tried to let my manager know, but she just smiled encouragingly, telling me to give it a try, assuring me if the videos were good, the quantity would not be what she focused on. Hearing this, I agreed to give it a try. My manager treated me well in the first month. However, one day when she found out I was a smoker, her attitude changed overnight. A colleague had actually done a facepalm when I told her about it, and she let me know that the manager hated smokers and often advocated to get them fired. She started nitpicking me on everything, from smelling like cigarette smoke after my breaks, coming in 5 to 10 minutes late despite doing more than 4 hours of overtime daily, not being contactable during break times. The list goes on. But I soldiered on, because I just wanted to do the work and do it well. 5 months in, I was called into the director's office, where I saw my manager putting on her best, displeased but gleeful face, and I felt my stomach drop. The director told me that she was disappointed because she had heard that I was falling behind on my work, and it was already halfway through the year and I had only completed 30 out of my 85 videos. I tried to explain that I had been working my butt off on these videos. I literally worked 6 days out of the week, over 60 hours, just to do what needed to be done, and that being a one-man army made things impossible, and also the fact that the videos I had put up grossed the highest views ever on their YouTube page. I also recounted how my manager said that she was looking for quality videos over quantity. The director dismissed this and stated that the KPI was simply 85 videos in a year, and since it was almost half a year in with my numbers at less than half, she felt it prudent to cut the cord early. I asked how would they even meet the KPI if they were to fire me now. My manager had snorted, saying, "We'll find a professional production house to finish your work." The director had given her an odd look but nodded in her support nonetheless, telling me, "You don't need to worry, manager will get the job done." That was when a light bulb went off in my head. Seeing as I was the content professional in the office, one of my jobs was to keep a database of production houses to use in the event we needed to do a shoot that required more resources, and I was sure that they would be using the production houses in my database as my manager had no contacts in the production industry. So I changed the contact numbers and messed up all the emails on all of the entries except one. The one, I had a friend working as a junior director, not an assistant director, but a director assigned to smaller video projects. I gave him a call and told him of my plan, and sure enough, within 2 days they were called to come in to pitch. I told him that I had a plan that was a win-win for us. It would instantly help him and put him on the fast track to a director position by bringing in that much business to his production house, and it would also benefit me financially. I would teach him exactly how to pitch to win over the boss and the director, and in turn, his company would pay me a standard finder's fee of 15%. He agreed instantly, and immediately put me on the line with his general manager, who, upon realizing this was to be 6 months of work for a high 6-digit payout, instantly agreed and drew up a contract. As it turns out, after I gave them a metaphorical step-by-step playbook, they were the perfect fit, somehow understanding the needs and style of the university, as well as the sort of themes the university wanted to feature. The director and my former boss were amazed that my friend's production house was so familiar with their content that they signed them up on the spot. Now, even back then, using a production house back then was not cheap. Each video that they produced could cost double to triple my monthly salary, given that they had specialized people for each function: producer, director, director of photography, gaffer, sound person, video editor, assistant director, production assistants, etc. But this meant that they could complete a video every 2 to 3 days. So yes, they produced 50 videos in a span of 4 months for over 100 months of my salary, and I sat back and collected the healthy 15%, which was about 15 months of my salary. This allowed me to put money aside for a holiday and the rest to further my studies with a respected film school overseas. I thought my plan ended here and I had gotten back at my former bosses, but to my surprise, I received a call from my colleague while I was holidaying in Bali one day. This was the same colleague who had facepalmed when I told her that my manager had found out that I was a smoker. Told me that my former manager had been fired and my director given a massive blasting by the chancellor of the university. The content creation project which I was hired for was only given a budget equating to about 1.5 years of my salary, and they had exceeded that budget by over 10 times. My former manager was so desperate to ensure that her content creation project could be completed that she had thrown caution to the wind, paying anything to get the job done so that she could show my director that she had completed the project and had approved the massive spend without getting consent from the director. So that is how I got my friend a super fast promotion to a full director in his production house, and a year of pay after getting unfairly fired from my job. Story 10 to 401k with a side of revenge. Someone suggested I post this story over here. Enjoy! When our first child was born, my ex forced me to quit my job. When our second child was 2, I found out about his affair. By then, he was extremely verbally, emotionally, and sometimes physically abusive. When he abused our firstborn, I put him out. That was in 2012. I couldn't afford daycare to work and had no family support. He refused to give me any money to take care of the kids, saying, "The courts haven't ordered me to give you a dime." He lied to the bank and had my accounts frozen and even assaulted me when I filed for default in the divorce. The judge finally ordered him to pay child and spousal support 6 months after I kicked him out. It was $2,562 a month. He refused to pay it until the garnishment kicked in, and by then he was $6,000 behind in support. I used that to get permission to move away. I remarried a year after the divorce. I checked the court docs, and there was a little box that said spousal support stopped upon remarriage if that box was checked. It wasn't checked, so I figured I was good. Instead of filing for his retirement, I just took that year of spousal support, $12,000, and left it alone. Spousal support was only ordered for 2 years. In 2017, he filed for sole custody of the kids out of nowhere. That was when he found out I had remarried, and he had paid spousal support to me during the first year of my marriage. I told him I took that money instead of filing for my share of his retirement. I said if he let me keep that $12,000, I wouldn't file to split his 401k. He demanded that I repay the spousal support, The judge ordered me to repay it but increased child support and deducted the repayment from that. It ended up that I got an extra $20.00 a month, and he repaid himself. He dropped his bid for custody in exchange for 2 extra weeks in summer. I pursued the retirement account split. He refused to cooperate and dragged it out for 4 years. It was so bad, they sanctioned him, and he had to pay me $600 a month for a year, in addition to child support. They also charged him with contempt. In January 2021, he proposed to his girlfriend. In May of 2021, I finally got the disbursement from his 401k. I won't say how much it was, but it was about 4 times the amount of spousal support overpayment. I had no idea it would be that much. I had thought it would be around $12K, which is why I thought keeping that year of spousal and not filing for his retirement account was a fair trade. Had he not tried to take the kids from me, I never would have filed to split the account. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. His fiancée emailed me recently and told me it is my fault he won't marry her because I cleaned out his retirement account. She said I shouldn't have stolen his money. I told her that I gave him the option to let me keep that year of spousal support or take it back, and I could file for his retirement. He chose to have me file for his retirement. I told her that if he really wanted to marry her and protect his assets, they could get a prenup so he wouldn't have to worry about it. She said she shouldn't have to sign a prenup because I robbed him. I never asked to be financially dependent on him. He clearly indicated he wanted a court order to take care of his kids, so I got him one. I tried to be fair and take the lesser amount by taking the spousal support and not filing for his retirement. He wouldn't let me. In summary, my ex refused to pay me until support orders dropped, refused to pay until they revoked his license, tried to get me in trouble for accepting spousal support over payment, and in the end it cost him a lot of money out of his 401k. Story 11. Landlord put me through 3 years of hell. My landlord was a terrible human being. Honestly, calling him a human is even pushing it. Just a few things he has done to me over the past 3 years. Stole my dryer and other household products that are in a common area. Made me pay for a plumbing repair which was deemed normal wear and tear. Tried breaking into my house. Retaliated against me because I went to my lawyer after he sent me a letter about a parking spot. He tried charging me an extra $150 per month. Mind you, I was never late for rent in 3 years, except for when he made me pay for the plumbing repair, so the next month I was a couple days late. The list goes on. Now this apartment was nowhere near nice. I found out the plumbing was illegal. He left me with a porch for years that has severe safety issues. The ceiling paint was always falling down. Gas heater was not up to code, and so on. I finally got my chance to leave after he wanted to raise my rent $500 per month. He will do anything and everything to get more money out of his tenants. So I called the building inspector 4 days before I left. I told him everything. The porch, when he finally replaced it, didn't have a permit and was definitely not up to code. I told him about the plumbing and the heater. I went on and on. The inspector came over the very next day. I saw him taking measurements. Each violation is a $500 per day fine until fixed. I honestly don't know what happened, but my God, did it feel good to finally get him back. He's at the very least on the town's radar. A week before I moved out, he tried telling me I needed to be out at a specific time. I never responded, and where I lived, that's not how it works. He tried to threaten me with the police if I wasn't gone. Well, I went to the police myself that morning to warn them. The landlord did come by, threaten me and harass me. I called the police. They informed him I was in the right. Long story short, he had broken into my apartment. I had left to go to storage. While I was gone, he nailed my door shut. I told the police to get the supervisor because I was over being harassed by this guy. Go figure, he left before the supervisor could get there. I'm positive he knew he'd be arrested on site. Got the police report. They're charging him with a felony for breaking and entering. Fines, plus a charge. Don't be a jerk to good people. Story 12. Got rude guy arrested for suspended license. This story takes place about 20 years ago. In the mid-2000s, my friends and I would frequent a small billiards place in a neighboring town where you could rent a table by the hour or play per game. We'd play a few games, watch whatever sports were on TV, and have casual conversations. There were no problems and no drama until about 3 months of us visiting this place. A guy shows and takes our spot at the billiards table. No big deal, we were all chatting anyway. 20 minutes later, my friend lets him know we want to play next game and the jerk is super dismissive. Needless to say, we didn't get in during the next game, so I politely let him know we wanted to play next. Another lady chimed in. She wanted the game after us. The guy blatantly ignored me and the other woman. Some more time going by and the guy leaves the table. We see our chance to get in, we put the quarters in, and the balls are dispensed except a green 6-ball. The guy took it to the bathroom with him. At this point, it was ridiculous, and we notified the manager. The manager noted it was 12:30, and they were going to be calling last call and closing, so he didn't want to make a scene by kicking him out. He gets us another ball so we can play. The guy comes out of the bathroom and knows we realized what he did. He smirks and proceeds to the patio to have a cigarette, bringing along his beer and the green billiard ball. The guy comes back in and tossed the ball he was holding onto the table, hitting a few balls on the table, and messing up our game. He goes up to the bar just in time for last call. One of the friends I was with suggested we follow him home, and each call the highway patrol to report a suspected drunk driver. 3 of 4 of us agree. So when he leaves, we used our trusty Nextel push-to-talk phones and coordinated several calls to the police. We provided details like license plate, vehicle make and model and color, and mentioned the car nearly hit another vehicle, was swerving between lines and driving erratically. This was under a 15-minute plan. We had no idea where the guy lived, but suspected it was close as he was visiting a neighborhood place, so our time was limited. The one guy who didn't notify the police tailed the jerk and called us giddy when a police officer pulled between him and the guy and turned in his lights to pull him over. The police blotter that week included an arrest of a guy who was pulled over after multiple calls of erratic driving. He wasn't arrested for DWI, but instead for driving on a suspended license. Story 13. A lawyer's pro-revenge on a landlord. Landlords are assholes, generally speaking. Everyone knows that. But if you think residential landlords are bad, they're nothing compared to commercial landlords. Landlords of commercial buildings are some of the cruelest, nastiest people I've ever come across. This revenge tale is about a commercial landlord and how I dealt with him. Back in the 90s, sometimes I'd go for lunch at this restaurant in the basement of our building. The place was called The Vault because it had a massive bank vault that had always been there, dating back to the days before the place was turned into a restaurant. The vault was so huge that they could seat a couple of tables in there, and you could eat dinner surrounded by rows of old, gleaming safe deposit boxes. One day I was there for lunch, and the owner took me aside. "The landlord's driving me nuts," he said. "The landlord drives everyone nuts," I said. I was a subtenant in the same building, sharing space with an older lawyer, Aaron, and the landlord was always causing us trouble. I'd already had a few run-ins with him, and we hated each other on sight. In most jurisdictions, commercial landlords don't need court orders to get you out if you're late with a rent. Instead, they just change the locks, and you find out about it when you show up and your key doesn't work. Every time our landlord had a dispute with anyone, which was often, he'd always threaten to change the locks. "He keeps demanding all this stuff for extra rent," the vault's owner said. "And it's really weird, because a lot of it's really old." The restaurant owner showed me a letter the landlord had served on him earlier that day. I looked over the demand and read a list of expenses for snow removal and parking lot repair and common area flooring and all kinds of crap going back years. I read it all the way to the end, and there it was, the usual clause, saying he was going to change the locks if the tenant didn't pay this and do that. "You do something to make the landlord hate you?" I asked, because this is a bit over the top, even for our asshole landlord. He knows I'm moving the restaurant. I think he's trying to grab as much money as possible before I go. Plus, he's giving me grief over the vault. He won't let you take it with you? Are you kidding? It weighs almost 100 tons, and I don't need it. But the lease says I have to remove it, and that I also have to restore the building to what it was before there was a vault. That would cost a fortune. The asshole landlord says if I leave the vault behind when I move, he'll sue. "Send your lease up to my office and let me look it over," I said. I finished my lunch, and when I got back to my office, the lease was waiting for me. It was just as bad as the restaurant owner said. The lease was a renewal of an assignment of a renewal. The original documents dating back to the shortly after WW2 when a bank first leased the place and the vault was installed. Somehow, the landlord had suckered the restaurant into taking over a lease that left him liable to remove a bank vault at the end of term. No big deal, I thought. The restaurant can default and all the landlord can do is sue a shell company. But when I got to the last page of the lease, there was a guarantee clause. The restaurant owner had personally guaranteed the lease, and he was on the hook for removing a vault weighing 100 tons, and then fixing the place up. It would cost a fortune. The case was hopeless, of course. That was obvious right away. But then I thought about the asshole landlord with his demands and his threats and his rent hikes, and I asked my brain to do me a solid, which it promptly did. I picked up the phone and called the restaurant owner. "I'm fucked, right?" he said. You're calling me to say there's no way out. That's what my commercial lawyer already said, but I just thought I'd ask. I can save you, but it's going to cost. How much? $5,000 in legals and another G note for the agent. Agent? What kind of agent? Real estate. Send up a check certified and leave the rest to me. The check hit my desk in less than an hour. I went to Aaron's office. I need a real estate agent, I said. You buying a house? Nope. Selling a house? Nope. By this point, I'd been sharing space with Aaron for almost 5 years, and he knew me pretty well. You pulling one of your stunts again? He asked. Yep, but nothing that will get you into trouble. Aaron reached out for his old-school Rolodex and started flipping through it. I know a guy, he said. Aaron knew all kinds of guys, and that's one of the reasons he eventually got disbarred. But he knew a guy, and he gave me the agent's name and number, and the next day I paid the agent a visit. I told him what I needed, and we agreed to terms. I gave him some papers and the cash for his fee. A few days later, I was again at the vault for lunch. The owner saw me walk in and greeted me himself. The landlord's here, he said. Why? For lunch, and to be an asshole. Let's sit in the vault room so I don't have to look at his face. He took me to the vault room, and with the door almost completely closed, we had a consultation while we ate pasta and drank red wine. We're making demand on the landlord, I said between bites of a perfect carbonara. Demand? What are we demanding? I pulled a document out of my briefcase and passed it to him while I sipped my wine. We're demanding that the asshole landlord release all the restaurant equipment, all the fixtures. The ovens, the freezers, the ventilation, everything you need to run a restaurant. The lease exempts all that stuff. The restaurant guy told me, he can't stop me taking what I want. The only thing that matters is the vault, and of course I don't want that. I shook my head. You need the vault, I said, and we're demanding that he release the bank vault as well. We're insisting that he let you take it out within 7 business days. You think you can beat the landlord with reverse psychology? You think if you treat him like a 2-year-old, you can manipulate him into doing what you want? We'll find out soon enough. He's had the demand for a couple of days now. The restaurant owner dropped his wine glass and it shattered on the marble floor. You already gave it to him? The restaurant owner said. He got up, swung open the vault door, and called for the waiter to clean up the mess. Let's see what the landlord has to say, I told him, and we walked over to the landlord's table. The landlord was a big, beefy man with a big appetite. He sat alone, eating a rack of lamb wolfishly with his hands. My client needs an answer today, I said. The landlord looked up at me as he chewed noisily. I'm the vault's lawyer, I said. I gave you a demand the other day. My client needs an answer right now. He needs the vault for a new place and he's got to make arrangements. Your client can forget about the bank vault, he said, wiping his massive greasy hands on an already soiled napkin. But you can't do that, I said. My shock was feigned, but the restaurant owner's jaw dropped for real. The landlord laughed at us. I'm the landlord. I can do what I want. I'm gonna need that in writing, because my client might sue, I said. Sue all you like. The landlord told me, sue till you're blue in the face. He told me that I'd have a formal response by day's end, and then he told me to go away and let him finish his lunch. When the letter arrived from the landlord, claiming ownership over the bank vault, I brought it downstairs and showed it to my client. How the hell did you do that? Trade secret, I said. The following month, the restaurant moved out and the place was empty, and that was too bad, because I had always liked eating at the vault. Now the restaurant was in a new location 20 minutes away. They called the new place the Vault, and they'd preserved the vibe of the old place. It was very similar, except they didn't have the bank vault. The bank vault, all 100 tons of it, was where it had always been, in the basement of the building where I rented space. I showed up for work a little after that, and Aaron collared me. The landlord's looking for you, he said. Oh yeah, what about? He's really angry. He said his deal fell through. Deal? He was supposed to rent the place downstairs to a new tenant, a bank or a credit union or something like that. They were supposed to come in to sign a lease, but they didn't show up. And what's that got to do with me? I said to Aaron, and I said the same thing again to the landlord when he managed to track me down a couple of days later. I know you were behind this, he said, his jowls quivering. I know it was you. That offer from the agent, it was all bullshit. Just a trick to make me keep the vault, so that your client could sneak out of the place and leave that fucking bank vault behind. I'm gonna sue. If you're looking for counsel, I think I'm gonna have to declare a conflict. I'm gonna sue the restaurant and that agent, and I'm gonna sue you. He stormed off. But the landlord didn't sue. Of course he didn't. He didn't have a contract to sue on, only a vague letter of intent that I'd drafted, enough to hook a greedy landlord who was used to having his way. The offer he'd received was non-binding, incapable of acceptance without the signing of a formal lease, which of course never got signed. When I left Aaron's place a year later, the downstairs was still unoccupied, with a sad, "For rent" sign sitting in the window, starting to look faded. Story 14. Steal furniture? Almost lose your job. So my dad owns a house that he's been renting for some time now. The tenants that lived there were for the most part decent people who my dad thought were trustworthy. That all changed about 2 months into the tenancy, when the tenant refused to pay the month's rent. My dad showed some leniency and gave them another month to pay up what was owed. They didn't pay a thing. By this point, my dad, frustrated by the whole situation and being 2 months out of rent money, offered them a deal. Leave the house ASAP and then only pay half the money owed. They countered with a different agreement. They would leave the house in a clean state with all of their furniture left behind as compensation. My dad, wanting to just be done with them, agreed. Cue to when my dad gets to the house, finding the place in a mess, with none of the furniture left behind, including the furniture that belonged to my dad in the first place. The 2 sofas that my dad owned were left behind, but they were trashed and left in the shed. When my dad confronted them, asking for them to pay up the full amount that the furniture was worth, he was met with a promise of payment after 2 weeks, which he didn't believe, and when he requested they pay earlier, he was met with, "Good luck getting your money," followed by laughing emojis. This made my dad angry, and he decided that he wasn't going to let this slide. My dad knew that the tenant was a Christian pastor of a church, and his son also had some job related to the church. My dad contacted the church and explained everything from how they hadn't paid him rent money to stealing the furniture and trashing the place. The church was somewhat interested about this behavior. The next day, my dad gets an angry phone call from the tenant's son cursing at him and asking him what he thought he was doing, contacting the church saying he was being unfair. My dad hung up on him only for him to attempt to ring 10 times after he hung up. From what we could piece together, the church had told the pastor that if he didn't settle things with my dad, him and his son would lose their jobs. My dad received the full amount for the furniture that same day and agreed to back off. My dad later said it was never about the money but the way this guy treated him and his values. My dad, being a Christian himself, was disappointed. Story 15. Stick me with hidden charges? I'll show you. So this past Christmas, my missus and I purchased one of our 9-year-old son's Santa gifts from a certain UK sports retail company that also have many stores here in Ireland as well. It was a football rebounder, kind of like a trampoline that you kick the ball at and it bounces back to you. Anyway, we purchased it from their Irish website and thought nothing more of it. A few days go by and we get a notification from a certain brown uniformed courier company that there are customs charges due on something, and as you can imagine, we've bought many things for the kids, so we had to double-check what we've ordered, and we didn't have anything left that was being imported, so we naturally assumed it was a scam. So I told the wife to call the company and find out who shipped it, and it was a different courier company based in the UK. After a bit of digging and investigating, it turns out that it's our rebounder. They had shipped it from the UK via a local carrier to the brown uniformed guys to deliver to us. Now, my wife and I are both on disability, so an additional charge of almost €50 when you're both already on a fixed income is harsh, especially at Christmas. So I told her to pay it and I'd deal with the retailer. The first day I called, I had to call 3 times, being stuck on hold for at least 20 minutes each time. But I was patient and polite because I've worked in a call center before, so I knew those people are only doing their job. But I asked to speak to a manager and was promised a call back each time that never happened. The second day was quite similar. The third day I was starting to get annoyed, so called back, waiting even longer on hold, and finally wasn't taking this shit any longer. I told the representative that all I wanted was the €50 back because our consumer rights in Ireland dictate that a person must be informed of any additional charges on a purchase at the very latest by the final checkout screen, and in this case there was nothing to show that, and I could easily replicate that issue by putting the same item in my basket and going all the way to the checkout screen again, and there was nothing saying we'd have to pay import charges. The representative was indifferent to the situation but tried to help, and what he said sent me over the edge. He offered me a measly €20 gift voucher to use on their website, but more importantly, he read a statement to me. He said, "We advise our customers that there may be DDU charges, delivery duty unpaid, i.e. customs charges, on any item that gets shipped outside of the UK." Then I asked him where it states this information, and he paused, then said he didn't actually know. I said, well, I know one thing. It doesn't say it anywhere on this transaction because I've checked and because this is a violation of my consumer rights. I'm going to give your company one last chance to make this right. Have your manager call me within the next 60 minutes, or I'm going to post this entire debacle on LinkedIn and link every senior officer in your company. Then I hung up the phone and waited. Yet again, no call. The next day I went on LinkedIn and followed through on my promise. I created a post detailing what they had done by sticking us with hidden charges and that they were ignoring our requests for a manager and everything they said and did. Then I tagged every senior officer at that company, from the regional managers through the European directors all the way to the CEO, and I shamed them for how they operate their company. This, ladies and gentlemen, was now an act of war. Shortly after I posted that, I noticed that they took down the item from their website in an attempt to hide this, but they must have thought in a simpleton that doesn't understand how the internet works. They didn't realize that when you searched for rebounder on their site that it shows the item in question. So I took a screenshot of that, then another of the item page that was now missing, but then I did a Google cached search for the same page and found a version from 2 days prior happily showing the item. Then I added a comment to my original post highlighting how they were trying to hide it, with the evidence, and trolling them for their heinous behavior, especially at Christmas. Then I tagged and shamed all the senior officers again, and at this point it was really starting to get some attention. Not only publicly, but 3 people in incognito mode viewed my profile. I wonder who they could have been. So naturally I took a screenshot of the 3 mysterious visitors listed on my profile, and did the same thing. Commented on my own post highlighting it and trolling them for their incompetence. The next morning, I got a call from a senior exec at their head office in the UK, practically licking my boots with apologies, asking what she can do to make this right. I told her I originally only wanted my €50 back, as it wasn't fair nor even legal that I had to pay it. But since I had to go to such lengths to get their attention now, I wanted my €50 back, a full refund on my entire purchase, and I wanted to keep the product. That was the only thing that would make this go away. She asked for a couple of hours to fix it, and I said, okay. About an hour later, I got another call from her again apologizing. She asked for my PayPal address where she sent the €50. Then she refunded the whole purchase, and she let us keep the product. Obviously, I thanked her for her help because at that stage, one was just happy it was over. But I'll be fucked if I'll let anyone walk all over my family, even if they are a £58 million annual company. The most of the story here is, don't take bullshit from anyone. I may be just one man, but my son's view of Santa is far more valuable to me than the opinion of some retail chain that doesn't care about its customers nor how it operates ethically. Got your own revenge tale? Share it below and don't forget to subscribe.